Welcome to System 2.
It powers our cars, it heats our homes, it makes the plastic in our phones. You know, oil is so fundamental to our lives, we barely even notice it anymore. It's like the invisible architecture of our entire modern world. But how did this one single resource come to define, well, everything? Let's dig into the incredibly complex story of oil. Right from the very beginning, oil was seen as way more than just a commodity. The hunt for it, as one source puts it, took on a metaphysical weight. This wasn't something people could just own. It was this force that seemed to own them, driving obsession, sparking conflict, and fueling this belief that it held the key to the future. And that really brings us to the core question of this whole explainer. Is oil some kind of miracle substance that's fueled an unprecedented level of human flourishing? Or is it a monster, a curse that brings disaster wherever it's found? We're going to explore both sides of that coin, drawing directly from the history and the data. To really understand oil's grip on us, you have to go back to the beginning, a time when it was treated with an almost religious reverence. Seriously. Early American commentators didn't just see a new fuel source. No, they saw a divine gift. One enthusiast actually declared that petroleum offered a more brilliant light, both literally and metaphorically, than coal ever could. It was seen as this profound sign of progress, a substance that would help solve the mighty problem of the nation's destiny. This wasn't just energy, this was providence.
But for every story of divine destiny, there's another one of pure disaster. So now, let's turn to the much darker side of our dependence on oil.
You know, whenever we talk about the downsides of oil, the conversation almost always goes straight to climate change. But the historical record, it shows a much, much broader pattern of harm, one that's been unfolding for over 150 years. The costs of oil have always been about more than just carbon. The timeline of oil-related destruction is just staggering. As early as 1861, that's just 2 years after the first commercial oil well, a fire at a flowing well in Pennsylvania killed 19 people. Fast forward to 1917, 10,000 workers went on strike to protest brutal conditions. Then in the 1970s, you have OPEC weaponizing oil, basically strangling economies worldwide. And more recently, some analysts argue that the six-fold surge in oil prices was a key trigger for the 2008 global financial crisis. Fire, conflict, economic collapse, they've been with oil from the very beginning. And all this brings us to this phenomenon known as the oil curse, or the paradox of plenty. You'd think that discovering a massive oil reserve would be like winning the lottery for a country, right? A ticket to prosperity. But so often, it's the exact opposite. In many resource-rich nations, like Nigeria, oil wealth has been linked to rising autocracy, civil war, and just rampant corruption. I mean, despite billions in oil revenue, many of these places lack basic services like clean water, medicine, or schools. The wealth doesn't trickle down. It gets concentrated, corrupted, and often leads to more suffering, not less. But that is only one side of this story. There is a very powerful counter-argument out there that says fossil fuels aren't a curse at all, that in fact, they're a moral good, absolutely essential for lifting humanity out of poverty and danger. Now, I know that might sound completely counterintuitive. How can the source of so many problems also be the solution? Well, the argument asks us to look past the side effects for a second and focus on the primary effect, the production of cheap, plentiful, and reliable energy. And what does all that energy let us view? Okay, check out this chart. It shows a really fascinating correlation. On the left, you see the big increase in global fossil fuel use between 1990 and 2015. Now look at the right. During that same period, there was a huge jump in the percentage of the world's population with access to clean water. And that's not a coincidence. Building, powering, and maintaining the massive systems that provide clean water and treat sewage is an incredibly energy-intensive job. Without cheap, reliable power, billions would still be exposed to deadly waterborne diseases. And get this number, 98%. We often hear about how fossil fuels make our climate more dangerous, but the data tells a really different story about our relationship with the climate. Over the last century, a period of massive fossil fuel expansion, the number of people who die from climate-related causes like storms, floods, and droughts has plummeted by 98%. It's not that the climate got safer, it's that we got more resilient, thanks to the energy that lets us build sturdy homes, develop early warning systems, and power rescue and rebuilding efforts. So, the argument basically breaks down like this. First, fossil fuels pretty much solved world hunger. They power the production of nitrogen fertilizers and the machines that plant and harvest crops on an industrial scale. Second, as we just saw, they enable sanitation on a massive scale. And third, and this is a really interesting one, by concentrating our impact, they actually allow us to preserve nature. Instead of clearing endless forests for fuel and farmland, we can get massive amounts of energy from a pretty small footprint, leaving more of the planet wild. So we've got two completely different stories, oil as a curse and oil as a blessing. But both of those stories really depend on one thing, supply. And here again, we find two radically different views on the future. So the whole debate revolves around this idea of peak oil. It's a concept that was first proposed by a geologist named M. King Hubbert way back in 1956. And he was right, by the way. He correctly predicted that U.S. oil production would peak around 1970. The theory is simple. At some point, we'll have pulled about half of all the recoverable oil out of the ground, and after that, production will begin a permanent terminal decline. The big question is, are we there yet? And here you have the two opposing camps. On one side, the geologists point to physical reality. Oil is a finite resource. The biggest, easiest to get fields were found over half a century ago. Now we're left with the dregs, the difficult, expensive oil that's way harder to extract. But on the other side, the economists have a totally different view. They argue that the real ultimate resource is the human mind. They believe that as one source runs low, rising prices will push innovators to develop new technologies, like fracking, or find entirely new energy sources. For them, we never truly run out. This whole debate over supply leads us directly to the final and maybe the most important question of all. What comes next? Whether we're running out of oil or choosing to leave it behind, what does a transition to a post-oil world actually look like? Well, the path forward is anything but simple. There are huge barriers to a post-oil world. Technologically, renewables like solar and wind are intermittent. The sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow, and they struggle to provide the 24/7 power our world demands. Economically, replacing our entire fossil fuel infrastructure is a project of almost unimaginable scale and cost. Politically, you've got powerful vested interests, sometimes called carbon capital, that actively resist change. And socially, the very fabric of our globalized lives is woven with the cheap, portable, dense energy that, so far, only fossil fuels have really provided. So we end up right back where we started, with this fundamental conflict. Is oil a blessing that has enabled human progress on a scale we've never seen before, a tool we should keep harnessing for the good of the world's poor? Or is it a curse, a destructive force whose time is past, something we have to break free from, no matter what the cost? The sources present incredibly compelling cases for both sides. Ultimately, the entire debate over oil forces us to ask a really difficult question. What is the true cost of power? The answer we choose won't just define our energy future, it will define the future of our world itself.